Welcome to Stories Room. Enjoy listening and don't forget to subscribe. My name is Alex, and for the longest time, I believed my marriage to Lisa was unshakable. We'd been together for 10 years, weathered our share of ups and downs, and mapped out countless dreams for the future. But looking back now, I realized just how naive I'd been. The reality is that the woman I adored had quietly drifted away from the life we built, long before I noticed. We met in college on a crisp autumn morning during our freshman year. The air was cool enough to hint at the start of sweater weather, leaves turning vibrant shades of gold and orange all around campus. I was studying economics, and Lisa was majoring in journalism. That year, some upperclassmen organized a massive scavenger hunt to welcome incoming students and help us get to know each other. On the day of the hunt, the sky was a perfect, cloudless blue. I remember standing in the quad, feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves, waiting to be placed into random teams. That's when I first saw her, Lisa. She had short, wavy brown hair that caught the sunlight, and there was an air of relaxed confidence in the way she stood, chatting with a friend. When the organizers announced teams, it turned out Lisa and I were on the same one. I almost couldn't believe my luck. "I'm Lisa," she said, flashing a disarming smile that made my heart pound. "Let's see if we can actually make it to the finish line without getting lost." Her tone was light and teasing, and I immediately felt a spark of connection. We spent the next couple of hours running around campus, searching for clues tucked behind sculptures, taped under benches, or pinned to bulletin boards in random hallways. Lisa led the charge with boundless energy. She was easy to talk to, and we joked about everything from the difficulty of the clues to our mutual confusion about campus buildings. We didn't win the scavenger hunt. We ended up lost near the library, ironically, but I still walked away feeling like I'd won something far more valuable. When we parted ways, Lisa handed me a torn piece of paper with her number. "In case we ever decide to do this again," she said, winking playfully. Over the following weeks, we exchanged a flurry of texts. Some were about mundane things, assignments, cafeteria food complaints, but the conversations quickly deepened into late-night messages about our dreams and fears. I learned that Lisa wanted to be a journalist who traveled the world, digging up important stories and shining a light on injustice. She had a restless spirit and was always on the lookout for a new angle, a new perspective. I, on the other hand, was fairly certain about my path in business or finance. My father owned a small logistics company, and I'd grown up learning about profit margins, overhead costs, and how to treat employees ethically. I told Lisa I hoped one day to start a business that not only made money but also contributed something meaningful to the community. Surprisingly, she found that fascinating. "You want to make an impact in your own way," she once said. I like that. Our first official date happened about a month after the scavenger hunt. Lisa suggested a fall lights festival at a local park. The evening was cool, the park filled with hundreds of lanterns and light installations. Families, couples, and groups of friends wandered around, admiring the glow. We walked side by side, sipping cups of hot chocolate from a food truck. "So, Alex," she began, her voice merging with the soft hum of chatter around us, "what's the biggest dream you've got?" I thought for a moment. Honestly, I'd love to start my own company, something that helps people in a tangible way. Maybe a consulting firm that specializes in supporting struggling small businesses or entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. Lisa nodded, eyes gleaming in the warm light. "I can see you doing that. You have this calm, steady vibe. People would trust you." We wandered through the park, weaving between glowing sculptures. Some installations resembled giant lighthouses, others looked like neon trees. At one point, we stopped in front of an archway decorated with strings of fairy lights. She turned to me, cheeks flushed from the cold, and said, "Sometimes I think I want to change the world, but maybe I'll just start by telling the stories of people who can't speak up for themselves. That alone could make a difference." "Sounds like you're already on your way," I replied, genuinely impressed by her passion. It was one of the first times I realized how deeply she felt about her ideals. Before we left, we lingered near the park exit. She studied me for a second, then smiled. "You're pretty great, you know." Her words were simple, yet they ignited a warmth inside my chest that kept me from feeling the chill in the air. After college, we moved to a bustling city full of skyscrapers and endless possibilities. The streets were perpetually busy, cars, buses, pedestrians, and cyclists weaving around each other in a chaotic ballet. We managed to rent a modest studio apartment in a somewhat quieter neighborhood, which became our little sanctuary away from the city's noise. I landed a job in finance, starting at the bottom rung of a mid-sized investment firm. The hours were demanding, but I was determined to climb the ladder. Lisa found work at a local newspaper as a junior reporter, where she covered everything from local crime stories to heartwarming profiles of community leaders. She was often out interviewing people, scribbling notes in her ever-present reporter's notebook. Our apartment may have been small, but it echoed with laughter, the smells of Lisa's experimental cooking, some dishes more successful than others, and the constant chatter about our future. We fell into an easy rhythm. On Sundays, we'd stroll through the local farmer's market, picking out fresh produce and dreaming of the day we could afford a bigger place. We talked about traveling, visiting Europe, Asia, maybe even Lisa's dream trip to South America, where she could practice her Spanish. One evening, we were on our tiny balcony, watching the city lights wink on, one by one. Lisa leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Alex, you're my anchor. I can be impulsive, reckless, but you keep me grounded." I remember feeling an unshakable certainty that as long as we faced life hand in hand, we could conquer anything. At the time, I never imagined that one day, the same woman who called me her rock would look at me like I was a stranger. Trouble crept in slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Looking back, I can pinpoint little signs, a growing distance in her eyes when I asked about her day, the subtle notes of tension in her voice when I tried to lighten the mood with a joke. The first big red flag was her increased workload. Or at least, that's what she told me. She started coming home later and later, often missing dinner. When she did show up, she seemed distracted, responding to texts or emails even during what little time we had together. One evening, I tried to greet her at the door with a hug. She stiffened, awkwardly patting my shoulder before pulling away. "Sorry, I'm tired," she mumbled. Work was crazy. At first, I chalked it up to stress. The newspaper world can be brutal, deadlines, last-minute changes, constant competition for a front-page story. But her demeanor kept deteriorating. Simple questions like, "How was your day?" seemed to annoy her. "Fine," she'd snap, barely glancing up from her phone. "Can I just have some space?" We had always been good. In college, we'd stay up all night talking about philosophy, politics, or our personal fears. But that connection had frayed. Every conversation felt forced, as if she was checking a box just to shut me up. The warmth, the sparkle both seemed extinguished. Lisa's irritability spread into every aspect of our lives. The smallest gestures I made were met with dismissiveness. If I offered to help with dinner, she'd snap, "I can handle it." If I tried to discuss finances, something we used to do together, she'd shrug and say, "It's your job, right?" It wasn't just me who noticed. My friend Damien, who had known Lisa since college, pulled me aside after a group outing and asked, "Hey, is everything okay between you two? Lisa seems off." "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I think she's just overworked." Damien gave me a look that suggested he believed otherwise but dropped the subject. Around this time, Lisa stopped laughing at my jokes, the same ones that used to crack her up. She'd roll her eyes if I teased her or tried to lighten the mood. Our shared hobbies, like watching indie films on weekends or playing board games, fell by the wayside. If I tried to set up a date night, she'd often cancel at the last minute, citing exhaustion or a sudden meeting. One Friday night, I planned a special dinner at a new restaurant we'd been talking about. I managed to get a reservation at a decent time, surprising her when she arrived home. She barely reacted. "Do we really have to go?" she muttered. "I'm not in the mood." I felt my heart sink. "We haven't done anything together in a while," I said softly. "I thought it might be nice." She shrugged. "Fine, but can you make it quick?" At the restaurant, she spent most of the evening staring at her phone. When I asked if something was wrong, she snapped, "Don't hover, Alex. Just let me breathe." I remember clenching my fists under the table, feeling a growing sense of helplessness. What had happened to us? Not long after, I started noticing that Lisa was changing her wardrobe, wearing more stylish clothes that I'd never seen before. She invested in new makeup, began going to the gym, and talked about wanting to reinvent herself. At first, I was supportive. "It's great you're focusing on yourself," I told her. "Let me know if you want me to join you at the gym." She gave me a thin smile. "This is something I want to do alone." We attended a friend's birthday party one weekend. Lisa wore a tight black dress that accentuated her figure, and she was undeniably stunning. However, I noticed how she kept engaging in lively banter with other men at the party. If one of them complimented her, she'd giggle in a way I hadn't seen in years. After the party, on our drive home, I tried to broach the subject gently. "You seemed really friendly with some of those guys tonight." Lisa let out a short laugh. "Why, are you jealous?" "I'm just not used to you flirting like that," I admitted. She sighed, turning to stare out the window at the passing streetlights. "Maybe it's time for me to feel alive again. I've been stuck in a rut for too long." The words stung. I realized we were drifting apart at a terrifying speed, and I had no idea how to stop it. Little did I know that Lisa's reinvention had a name: Mark. He was the new hire at her newspaper, a tall, charismatic guy with a confident swagger. Lisa told me about him in passing, describing him as good at networking, a smooth talker who can get interviews like nobody else. I didn't suspect a thing initially. I assumed she was simply impressed with a coworker's skills. But their relationship took a turn. Late nights in the office, shared rides to press events, innocent text conversations that became personal. She complained to him about how I didn't understand her anymore, and he responded with stories of his own failing marriage. One evening, Lisa came home after midnight. I was pacing in the living room, trying to quell the worry coursing through me. "You didn't answer any of my calls," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Phone died," she responded curtly, avoiding eye contact. I caught a whiff of perfume that wasn't hers. My stomach clenched. "Who were you with?" She shrugged. "Colleagues. We had a wrap-up meeting after an event." That night, while she showered, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the screen, a message from Mark. I didn't open it, but the preview read, "Tonight was perfect, can't wait until," before it cut off. My chest tightened. Everything felt surreal. I wanted to confront her then and there, but some part of me still clung to denial. For a brief period, it seemed like Lisa was battling her own conscience. The next morning, she made me coffee and even asked about my job for the first time in weeks. "How's the new project going?" she said, her eyes darting around like she was trying to appear casual. I was startled by her sudden show of interest. "It's busy. I have to finalize some reports by Friday." She nodded, fiddling with the cup in her hands. "I know we've both been caught up in work. Maybe we should take a weekend trip soon, just to reconnect." Her words briefly warmed my heart. "I'd love that," I said, feeling a cautious hope that maybe she wanted to fix things. That same night, around 3 a.m, I woke up to find her side of the bed empty. I walked into the kitchen and found her staring at her phone, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. "Lisa, what's going on?" I said, rushing to her side. She quickly locked her phone and wiped her face. "Nothing," she murmured. "Just a bad dream." She wouldn't let me hold her. Instead, she pushed past me, muttering about needing space. Something was tearing her up inside, but she refused to share it with me. In hindsight, I think she felt guilty about Mark but couldn't bring herself to end it. Soon, the guilt gave way to secrecy again. She got bolder about meeting Mark, using lame excuses like an urgent editorial meeting or field research. Each time, my stomach twisted in knots. I knew something was happening, but I had no proof other than a single partial text message and her strange behavior. I tried to push down my suspicions, telling myself that if I confronted her without solid evidence, it might drive her away even more. But the feeling that my world was unraveling never left. One Friday afternoon, my friend Clara, who worked in the same building as Lisa, called me. "Alex, I don't want to cause trouble, but..." I saw Lisa get into a car with that Mark guy, and they seemed really close. I felt a flash of anger and humiliation. "Thanks for letting me know," I said quietly. That evening, when Lisa claimed she was working late again, I decided to verify for myself. I drove to the newspaper's office, parking a discreet distance away. After an hour of waiting, I saw them walk out together. Mark held her by the waist, whispering something in her ear, and she laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. I sank into my seat, a cold wave of nausea rolling through me. I wanted to storm over, confront them both, demand an explanation. But some invisible force kept me frozen. Maybe it was shock, maybe shame. Instead, I turned the key in the ignition and drove home, each mile feeling like a coffin nail in the marriage I once cherished. That night, Lisa came home, humming softly as she stepped through the door. I was seated on the couch, the lights low, my phone on the coffee table with pictures I had snapped of her and Mark, just in case. She paused in the entryway when she noticed me. "You're up." "Yeah," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Couldn't sleep." She tried to walk past me into the bedroom, but I stood up, blocking her path. "We need to talk, Lisa." Her eyes flickered with annoyance. "About what?" "I'm tired." "About Mark," I said, my throat tightening around the name. "I know you've been seeing him." Lisa's face went blank for a moment. Then she rolled her eyes. "You're being paranoid." I grabbed my phone and opened the gallery, showing her the photos I had taken. She stared at the images, her cheeks flushing with anger or shame. I couldn't be sure. For a second, I expected her to break down, maybe apologize. Instead, she laughed, but it was a brittle, hollow sound. "So you've been following me," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "God, Alex, that's pathetic." A torrent of conflicting emotions washed over me: rage, heartbreak, disbelief. "You're cheating on me, and you think I'm the pathetic one?" She crossed her arms. "Maybe if you weren't so distant, I wouldn't have to find what I need elsewhere." That stung. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Lisa, if you've been unhappy, you could have talked to me instead of sneaking around." She shook her head. "I tried, Alex. You're always too busy, too wrapped up in your own goals." My voice rose despite my efforts to keep calm. "I've been working for our future, for the life we planned." "Yeah? Well, maybe I got tired of waiting," she snapped back, before turning on her heels and storming off into the bedroom. I stood there, fists clenched, feeling like the ground had crumbled beneath my feet. As if my situation with Lisa wasn't complicated enough, I had my own secrets. Around the time Lisa started pulling away, I found myself drawn to Emily, my assistant at the investment firm. She was a recent graduate, brimming with enthusiasm and always eager to learn. Our relationship began on professional terms, late nights at the office, poring over spreadsheets and proposals. But the lines started to blur one evening when Emily mentioned she felt lonely in the city. Something in her vulnerability spoke to me, and before I knew it, we were sharing more personal stories. One night, after we wrapped up a big project, I offered to drive her home. At her doorstep, she paused, turning to face me in the soft glow of a street lamp. "Thanks for everything, Alex," she said, her voice quivering slightly. "I really appreciate how supportive you've been." That's when it happened. She leaned in, brushing her lips against mine. For a split second, I froze, every thought colliding in my head. But I didn't pull away. The kiss was brief, and once it ended, we both looked at each other with shock. "This was a mistake," I muttered. Still, part of me couldn't deny that it felt nice to be wanted. I hated myself for it almost immediately. By the time I got home, guilt pressed down on me like a heavy weight. Lisa was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood by the bedroom door for a while, wondering if I should confess. I didn't. Instead, I convinced myself it was a one-time slip. But the guilt lingered, making me feel unworthy of confronting Lisa's betrayal even though hers was ongoing. The day it all imploded, I arrived home earlier than usual, hoping to talk to Lisa openly about everything: her affair, our future, my own mistake. I still nurtured a small hope we could salvage something if we were both honest. But when I got there, I found her on the phone, pacing the living room floor, her voice hushed. She didn't notice me right away. "I miss you," I heard her say, voice trembling slightly. "No, I can't get away tonight." "He's here. Yeah, maybe tomorrow. I'll let you know." I felt my stomach drop. She was talking to Mark, making plans to see him again. Suddenly, the faint hope I'd been clinging to vanished. When she finally looked up and saw me, she ended the call, slipping her phone into her pocket. We stared at each other across the room, tension crackling like static. "Alex, she began, but I cut her off, raising my hand. "Don't," I said quietly, forcing myself to maintain composure. "We both know what's happening." She looked away, tears forming in her eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you." A surge of anger shot through me. "Then why did you? Why do you keep doing it?" She sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. "Because I'm unhappy," she whispered, voice muffled. "We're not the same people we used to be." I exhaled, feeling tears sting my own eyes. "I know I'm partly to blame, but sneaking around with Mark? Is that how you handle it?" For a moment, I thought she might say something to ease the pain, to at least own her mistakes. Instead, she lifted her head, eyes cold. "You're not innocent either, Alex." I froze. "What do you mean?" She smirked, though her face was still wet with tears. "Emily? Your assistant? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" A wave of shame crashed over me. We were both complicit in destroying what we'd built. That realization felt like a death knell, the final blow that destroyed any illusion we might work things out. After that, we barely spoke. Lisa moved into the guest room. We coexisted like strangers in our own home, passing each other in the hallway without a word. The air in the apartment felt thick and stale, filled with tension and regret. I started collecting evidence, screenshots, pictures, anticipating a messy divorce. I hated the idea of waging a legal war, but I also felt the need to protect myself. Meanwhile, Lisa became even more elusive. Sometimes she didn't come home at all. I'd wake up in the morning to an empty apartment, suspecting she was with Mark. One night, she approached me hesitantly while I was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets for work that I was too distracted to fully absorb. "Alex," she said softly, "I think we should try counseling. Maybe we can fix this." I looked up, scanning her face. She seemed genuinely lost, eyes bloodshot from crying or lack of sleep. But something in me had snapped. "It's too late, Lisa. We've both crossed too many lines." Her lower lip trembled, but she nodded. "I understand," she whispered. The divorce proceedings were as brutal as I feared. Lawyers pored over our finances, every bank statement, every transaction. Lisa tried to argue that I hadn't been emotionally supportive, which was true to some extent, but my evidence of her ongoing affair was more damning. In the end, we settled on a division of assets that allowed me to keep most of what I'd worked for before our marriage. When the judge finalized everything, I expected to feel relief. Instead, I felt a hollow ache. 10 years of life together, undone in a matter of months. As we left the courthouse, Lisa gave me a sad, rueful smile. "Maybe in another life, we could have made it," she said. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I moved into a smaller apartment in a different part of the city, a place with a view of a park, where I could watch people walking their dogs or playing with their kids. I started taking care of myself more, going to the gym, trying out yoga, and even learning to cook new recipes. Emily, the woman I'd had that single moment with, ended up leaving the firm for another job across the country. We parted on tense but civil terms, agreeing it was best not to continue something that began under questionable circumstances. In time, I found someone else, someone who met me at a volunteer event, of all places, and, with her, I took things slowly, cautiously. Every now and then, I'd catch myself questioning if I could truly trust again. Sometimes I'd see Lisa's name pop up in my social media feed, a new article she'd written, or a photo of her with friends. We didn't block each other, but we never interacted. From what I gathered, she remained at the newspaper, perhaps with Mark still in her life. My new partner, Sophie, understood my scars. Early on, I told her the whole story, not wanting secrets to poison another relationship. She listened compassionately, telling me her own stories of heartbreak. With her, I started to rediscover the good parts of love, kindness, mutual support, genuine excitement about each other's accomplishments. The lesson: now, as I look back, I see that trust is like a delicate tapestry woven over time. Once it's torn by betrayal, you can't simply stitch it back together and pretend the tear was never there. The threads might hold, but the damage remains visible, a permanent scar. Lisa and I both made mistakes. Hers were more prolonged, but my single betrayal also mattered. The biggest lesson I learned is that complacency and a lack of honest communication can rot a marriage from the inside out. If you feel something is off, address it. If you're unhappy, speak up before it's too late. Today, I'm in a better place. I have someone who respects me, and I strive to respect her in return. That old part of me that wonders, what if this person betrays me too, still rears its head occasionally. But each day, I remind myself that a new relationship deserves a clean slate, cautious optimism, not jaded cynicism. I won't deny that some wounds never fully heal, but living in fear is no way to live at all. In the end, The best revenge against a painful past is to move forward, find peace, and build a life that you're proud of. Because no betrayal can overshadow genuine happiness found after the storm. And that is my story, the story of how everything I believed in collapsed, and how I managed to rebuild. It's a testament to the fragility of trust and the resilience of the human heart. I hope if you ever face a similar crossroads, you'll remember to fight for what matters but also know when to let go. Because sometimes, letting go is the first step to truly living again. As a child, I never thought I'd grow up to face a moment where I'd have to question someone's loyalty. My parents had a relatively stable marriage. My dad was quiet and hardworking, and my mom was affectionate and always attentive to small details. As an only child, I absorbed their dynamic as a template for what marriage should be, built on kindness, compromise, and constant reassurance. I first learned heartbreak as a teenager when my high school girlfriend dumped me for a jock from the basketball team. At 15, it felt like the end of the world. My father tried to comfort me, telling me first love isn't always meant to last. My mother gave me advice about focusing on self-worth. You need to believe you're worth something more than heartbreak, she said, hugging me while I sulked on the living room sofa. Back then, I couldn't imagine heartbreak beyond the teenage drama. But as life would show me, heartbreak can be far more complex when you're an adult, sharing a home and a history with someone. I think it's important to shed some light on Lisa's background too. She grew up in a small town, the youngest of 3 sisters. Her parents divorced when she was 10, and it was messy. Lots of shouting matches, slamming doors, and whispered gossip around the neighborhood. Lisa once told me about the afternoon her father walked out, suitcase in hand, while her mother stood in the front yard screaming at him. I promised myself I'd never be like them, she said, her voice trembling a bit. They tore each other down until there was nothing left. When I met her, she was determined to prove that lasting love could exist, that her parents' failings wouldn't define her own relationships. And for many years, it seemed like we were proving exactly that, forging a bond based on mutual respect and shared dreams. However, looking back, I can see how Lisa always carried a fear of stagnation. She hated the idea of routine. She craved excitement, spontaneity, and the thrill of something new. Whenever things got too comfortable, she'd find a way to shake them up, like when she decided on a whim that she wanted to take tango lessons or spontaneously booked a trip to an out-of-state art exhibition we knew nothing about. I suspect part of Lisa's decision to cheat might have come from an unacknowledged fear of falling into the same mundane trap that ruined her parents' marriage, predictable arguments, silent resentment, a feeling of being stuck. Mark represented an escape, someone who made her feel desired and alive. I don't excuse her betrayal, but I can at least trace the psychological path that might have led her there. One particularly vivid memory involves the night I first saw Mark's text on Lisa's phone. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard her come home. She walked into the bedroom, thinking I was fully asleep, and placed her purse on a chair. A few minutes later, I heard her phone vibrate against the wooden surface. Curiosity got the better of me. I got up and stepped into the dimly lit hallway just as the phone vibrated again. My heart pounded. I could hear the shower running, the water beating against the tiles. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, faint steam drifting out. She was showering at 1 a.m, unusual for her, but not impossible. I glanced at the phone lying on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up, revealing a message preview. Tonight was perfect. Can't wait until. My stomach lurched. My initial thought was that it might be from a friend, but the tone was clearly romantic or intimate. I took a step closer, instinct screaming that I shouldn't be spying, but another voice telling me I needed to know. Before I could pick up the phone, the screen went dark. The sudden darkness felt like a metaphor for the creeping suspicion clouding my mind. I returned to bed, heart hammering in my chest, wrestling with whether to confront her right away or wait for more evidence. I decided to wait. My mind spun with questions, none of which had easy answers. I remember opening up about my suspicions to my friend Damien in more detail a week or so later. We met at a quiet pub after work. The place had wooden floors that creaked a bit, a few round tables, and dim yellow lights that gave everything a cozy vibe, even if it was somewhat run down. Damien took a sip of his beer, I scanning my face. "You look like hell, Alex. What's going on?" I swallowed hard, trying to compose myself before speaking. "I think Lisa might be seeing someone else," I finally admitted, looking down at my own half-empty glass. He leaned in, elbows on the table. You're serious? I nodded. She's been distant. Her phone is glued to her hand. I saw a suspicious text the other night. Damien exhaled sharply. Man, have you confronted her? Not yet. I'm trying to be sure. I don't want to accuse her without proof, I said, running a hand over my face. He nodded sympathetically. This is tough. Lisa used to be so open, so transparent. It's hard to picture her sneaking around. I thought about the old days, her laughter, her warmth. Yeah, well, people change, I guess. Damien patted my shoulder. Look, I'm here if you need anything. But don't let it eat you up. If you're right, you have to address it sooner or later. I managed a weak smile. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. That night, as I returned home, I felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. If Lisa was truly betraying me, I needed to confront it. Living in limbo was worse than facing the painful truth. Soon after, I decided to call my mother, a woman known for her sage advice, even if it was sometimes wrapped in tough love. She answered the phone in her usual cheerful tone. Alex, darling, how are you? I tried to sound casual. I'm all right, Mom. Just wanted to check in. She paused. You never just call to check in. What's wrong? I sighed, feeling a lump form in my throat. My mother had a way of seeing right through me. It's Lisa. Things haven't been good. I think she might be involved with someone else. There was a brief silence on the other end. Oh, Alex, I'm so sorry. Have you talked to her about it? I scoffed at the question. She denies it. Or she twists things around, saying I've been distant. And truthfully, maybe I have. Work has been crazy, and we've both been stressed. My mother's voice softened. Sweetheart, marriage takes constant work. You and Lisa have to communicate. If she's unhappy, or you're unhappy, ignoring it won't make it go away. I know, I whispered. I just don't know if we can fix this. Sometimes it feels like she doesn't even care anymore. She took a deep breath. Only you two can decide if it's fixable. But you have to be honest, with each other and with yourselves. If it's over, don't drag out the pain. But if there's still love there, fight for it. Her words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. The final confrontation with Lisa happened on a night that was oddly quiet. No storms, no dramatic weather, just a still, chilly evening. I was in the living room, flipping through a stack of mail, when she walked in. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and she smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. She dropped her keys on the table and glanced at me. Why are you always up? She asked, feigning nonchalance. I stood, bracing myself. We need to talk. Now. Lisa tensed, her gaze darting to the bedroom. I'm tired, she said, attempting to brush past me. No, you're not doing that again, I said, my voice cracking. We can't keep ignoring this. She folded her arms. Fine. Talk. For a moment, I was at a loss for words. I'd rehearsed a dozen speeches in my head, yet none of them seemed adequate now. I know about you and Mark, I finally said. Her eyes narrowed. Did Clara or someone else at work tell you? I blinked. I hadn't expected her to admit it so casually. Does it matter how I found out? She shrugged, looking away. I guess not. My anger flared. So you're just admitting it? You don't even care to deny it. Lisa's shoulders sagged. I'm tired of lying. I'm done pretending. Silence settled between us like a heavy fog. I felt tears well up. How did we get here? She hesitated, eyes glistening. Maybe we let our dreams overshadow our reality. You became so focused on building a future that you forgot to be present. And me? I got scared. I felt trapped. Mark offered something different. That's a weak excuse, I spat. You could have talked to me. She laughed bitterly. Right? Because talking ever got us anywhere lately? I stared at her, a mixture of betrayal and sorrow swirling within me. So what now? She shook her head. I don't know. I walked to the bedroom, opening the closet and pulling out a suitcase. We can't keep living like this. One of us has to leave. Lisa leaned against the wall, tears streaming down her cheeks. Are you sure that's what you want? I took a long time to answer, my voice barely above a whisper. It's what's left. By the time we got to the stage of discussing divorce, both of us were emotionally drained. We lawyered up, each trying to protect ourselves. In the process, We ended up tearing each other apart, arguing over every possession, every bank account. The Lisa I had once admired had turned into someone I barely recognized, and I'm sure she felt the same about me. In the final court hearing, we sat at opposite tables, not making eye contact. The judge asked a few questions, gave us a lecture about trying mediation, but neither of us was in the mood for that. When the gavel came down, it felt less like an ending and more like a quiet, miserable epilogue. I found an apartment in a neighborhood dotted with tall oak trees and older homes that had been renovated into apartments. It wasn't fancy, but it had character, a winding staircase, a small front porch. My first night there, I unpacked some dishes, a laptop, and a few mementos of better times, like the photo of me and Lisa at the Fall Lights Festival. I stared at that photo for a long time before tossing it in a drawer. Over the next few months, I tried to focus on self-improvement. I went to therapy to unpack the guilt and the feeling of betrayal. It helped to talk, to see my own faults more clearly. For a while, I was angry at Lisa, at Mark, at myself. But the therapist encouraged me to see the situation with more nuance. You both contributed to the unraveling, she said. It's okay to feel wronged, but it's also important to acknowledge your part. That realization didn't absolve Lisa's actions, nor did it absolve me of my single, brief betrayal, but it gave me a sense of closure. I started sleeping better, eating better. I picked up painting, of all things, turning to small canvases as a way to express the emotions I couldn't put into words. Time passed, and I gradually let the bitterness go. One day, I stumbled upon Lisa's social media profile and saw she was traveling more for her articles. She looked happy, or at least content. I didn't see Mark in her photos, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. I closed the page, feeling a strange sense of gratitude for what we once had, even though it ended so painfully. When I eventually fell in love again, it felt different, wiser, calmer, and yet tinged with an awareness that love could break you if you weren't careful. My new partner understood that. We made promises to communicate openly, to never let resentments fester. If either of us sensed distance creeping in, we'd sit down and talk about it, no matter how uncomfortable. And so life went on. The memory of Lisa, and everything that unfolded between us, became a chapter in my personal history, serving as a reminder that trust must be nurtured and that ignoring problems is the quickest way to lose something precious. Betrayal can come from both sides if the dialogue breaks down. In the end, I learned that the true enemy of love is complacency, and the true friend of love is honest, sometimes painful communication. It's a lesson I carry with me, determined never to repeat the mistakes that cost me my first great love. If sharing this story helps someone else recognize the signs early or encourages them to speak up about their needs, then perhaps the heartbreak wasn't in vain. Because in every ending, there's a seed of a new beginning, and every scar is a testament to surviving the worst and still finding the courage to hope again. That, I believe, is the most important lesson of all. That's the end of our story. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on new stories and share this video so others can discover these great stories too.